A critical element of this new sanctions package is that whilst buying Russian oil has been outlawed for the UK and the EU for some time, we have still amazingly been buying from places like India, refined products, diesel, for example, made out of Russian oil. So we are indirectly funding Russia's war in Ukraine. That's clearly intolerable. And that loophole has now finally, after 3.5 years, been closed.
The UK has announced its biggest set of sanctions against Russian spy operatives. The GRU agents are accused of targeting the UK and its allies in assassination attempts, cyber hacking and sabotage. The group includes the operatives who planned the Salisbury Novichok attack and are said to be a crucial part of Vladimir Putin's campaign of destabilization and disinformation. Former chief executive of the National Cybersecurity Centre, Kieran Martin, spoke to Times Radio about the nature of the operatives' online activities and identified by the government's National Cybersecurity Centre.
For example, they talk about the way the Julia Skripal email was compromised. This involves some hard-to-detect malware, which ends up essentially forwarding emails from Outlook without them turning up in your sent items. So for the ordinary user, it's pretty hard to detect. There's some very useful stuff for network defenders, people working in IT.
Well, I'm pleased to say that joining us is Tom Keatinge, founder director of the Centre for Finance and Security at the Royal United Services Institute. Tom, thanks for coming on the show. First of all, can you explain these sanctions against these spies? Because as I understand it, these spies are based in Russia, so I'm not sure how one actually can sanction them when they're not in the UK.
Well, thanks for having me. I mean, there are multiple reasons why the government might issue sanctions. Obviously, the ones that people will be very familiar with are the sanctions on Russia in the context of its full-scale invasion of Ukraine. That's to try and restrict the funding of Russia's military and to get Vladimir Putin to change his egregious action. In the case of sanctions like this, it's more a naming and shaming issue. It's kind of, we know what you did, we're going to telegraph it publicly, and perhaps dissuade others from taking those steps. So do these GRU agents have money in bank accounts in the high street in the UK that we can freeze? No. Are they going to plan to come on holiday to the UK and visit the beautiful Salisbury Cathedral again, as they claimed last time? No. But at the same time, we know what you're up to, we're tracking you, and importantly, I think as Kieran Martin mentioned there is some education for the population in all of this, which is cybersecurity is important.
And Tom, do we know exactly what these individuals, as you point out, have been named and shamed? Do we know what they actually have done in terms of disrupting UK infrastructure?
Well, I think there are a mix of issues that are being pointed to by these sanctions, and it's not merely to do with the UK, by the way. I mean, these units were involved in targeting of facilities in Ukraine, for example, the dreadful attack on the theatre in Mariupol in 2022, I guess it was. But then also targeting Julia Skripal's phone in the run-up to the poisoning that happened in Salisbury back in, 2018. So I think these are malicious players. They are using malign tools for cyber heists, if you like. And that's something that the government wants to telegraph both internationally, but as I say, also perhaps to the population, you need to make sure your cybersecurity is up to date.
And Tom, do we know why the government have done this now? What's behind the timing of this?
Well, I don't know the answer to that. What I would say is that in the conversations that I'm privileged to have on Whitehall from our seat at RUSI, there is definitely a desire under the new government to be more muscular or more creative with the way they're using sanctions. For the last 3.5 years, if you work in sanctions policy in the UK or anywhere else, you've been focusing on Russia, you've been focusing on its invasion of Ukraine. Now, I think there is a desire. We've seen the government, for example, use anti-corruption sanctions to target people who've tried to undermine elections in places like Moldova. So I think this is part of an attempt to be more creative, I think successfully, frankly, be more creative in the way the government uses sanctions as part of its foreign policy toolbox.
And at the same time, or rather coincidentally, within the last 48 hours, we've had some EU sanctions, and they're more focused on Moscow's oil industry. I mean, I'm astonished quite how much oil the EU and indeed the rest of the world are still buying from Russia. Can you explain the sanctions and will that make any difference to the situation?
Yeah, so this is the 18th package, as they call it, in Brussels that they've issued. I mean, this has been, a longer gestation period than an elephant. It's really been going on and on and on, talked about for several months. expectations that it would be hard hitting and all the rest of it. I think they've now decided it's not hard hitting, but it's one of the strongest packages that the EU has issued. And the key element here that we are trying to go after is how does Russia fund its war in Ukraine? And it funds it through the sale of oil, as you rightly point out. Now, the sanctions issued by the UK, the EU, the US, and other G7 allies are not global. And therefore, if you're India or you're China, in theory, you can carry on dealing with Russia as you like. But the G7 community, the EU, the UK, and others, reserve the right to respond to what you do. And a critical element of this new sanctions package is that whilst buying Russian oil has been outlawed for the UK and the EU for some time, we have still amazingly been buying from places like India, refined products, diesel, for example, made out of Russian oil. So we are indirectly funding Russia's war in Ukraine. That's clearly intolerable. And that loophole has now finally, after 3.5 years, been closed.
And do you think that this will have a significant impact in terms of the funds that flow into Moscow's treasury?
Look, I would dearly love it to have an impact. I'm a big fan, if you like, of the use of sanctions. But it is easy to suggest that, well, this should have happened 3 years ago. Why are we sitting here in July 2025 with 500 drones a night still landing on Kyiv and other cities in Ukraine? And only now have we woken up to the fact that we're actually still funding the war because we're buying refined products from Russia via places like India. So, I don't want to say too little, too late, but boy, have we been waiting for Godot for a long time on this one. It's happened now, but now we need to implement it. We need to make people realize that we're serious.
And briefly, Tom, have we had any reaction from Moscow to these double sort of set of sanctions?
I think the internet meme would be meh. The point is that for the Russians, they are schooled in how to evade sanctions. In fact, I saw this week that there is a university now in Moscow that has set up a master's program on how to circumvent sanctions. Can you believe it? So they know what they're doing. We need to try and get ahead of them. And frankly, unfortunately, for the last 3.5 years, we've been playing catch up. But let's see what happens next.
Well, thank you very much indeed. That was Tom Keatinge, founding director of the Centre for Finance and Security at the Royal United Services Institute.
I've been at the G20 in Durban this week, meeting with colleagues to discuss what measures we can take collectively to grow the world economy and to help support the economy in Britain. Things like improving trade flows, industrial strategy, as well as investing in infrastructure to boost our productivity and growth. These are shared challenges across the G20, and Britain plays a leading role in helping develop those policies for Britain, but of course around the world. Today we've announced a reduction in the oil price cap that applies to Russian exports of oil, a reduction from $60 per barrel to $47.60 a barrel. That's a significant reduction, and this is about ratcheting up the pressure on Russia to reduce their ability to fund their war effort. And this is all about Britain standing with our friends and allies in Ukraine to put them in the strongest possible position against Russia's illegal invasion. The important thing about what we have announced today is that we have taken these steps in conjunction with our allies in the European Union. So this is not Britain acting alone. This is a partnership with our European allies to put maximum pressure on Russia and reduce their ability to fund their war effort. The oil price cap that's been in place since 2022 has already had an impact on reducing Russian oil revenues, but today we are going further to support Ukraine and to put pressure on Russia.